family bonds are supposed to be unbreakable. Through thick and thin, brothers are meant to stand side by side, defending each other against the world's harshest trials. But what happens when that sacred bond shatters? When betrayal comes not from a stranger, but from the one person who should have your back? This is the chilling case of two brothers, Jonathan and Michael Graves, whose relationship, built on trust, loyalty, and shared history, spiraled into deceit, greed, and ultimate destruction. What began as an inseparable bond turned into a nightmare of manipulation and murder, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. Jonathan and Michael grew up in the quiet town of Brookhaven, where their family name was synonymous with success. Their father, Richard Graves, was a self-made businessman who turned a small real estate firm into a multi-million-dollar empire. Their mother, Eleanor, was a compassionate woman who devoted her life to philanthropy. From the outside, the Graves family appeared perfect, a symbol of prosperity and familial harmony. However, beneath this polished exterior lay layers of tension and unspoken expectations that would eventually tear the family apart. The brothers' childhood was defined by stark contrasts. Jonathan, the eldest by 3 years, was the golden child. He excelled academically, followed in his father's footsteps, and quickly became an integral part of the family business. His achievements were celebrated as milestones for the entire family, reinforcing his role as the heir apparent. Michael, on the other hand, was always the rebel. While intelligent, he resented the pressure to conform and struggled to find his own identity outside of Jonathan's shadow. This disparity created a competitive tension between them, one that, over the years, evolved into something far more sinister. As they grew older, Jonathan continued to thrive in the corporate world, while Michael floundered between failed ventures, accumulating debts and resentment. Though Jonathan often helped his brother financially, Michael saw these gestures as condescending, further deepening his resentment. These financial transactions only highlighted the growing divide between them. Jonathan viewed them as acts of kindness, while Michael perceived them as reminders of his inadequacy. Their mother, Eleanor, noticed the growing rift but believed time and maturity would eventually mend the wounds. She was wrong. Instead, the gap widened, fueled by jealousy, pride, and a sense of entitlement that simmered just below the surface. Eleanor's attempts to bridge the gap were met with frustration. She organized family dinners, encouraged open communication, and even suggested therapy, but neither son seemed willing to address the root of their issues. Jonathan dismissed Michael's grievances as mere excuses, while Michael harbored bitterness toward Jonathan's perceived superiority. The once close bond between the brothers deteriorated into a toxic relationship marked by passive-aggressive behavior, mistrust, and unresolved conflicts. By the time their father passed away, the foundation of their relationship had already crumbled, setting the stage for the tragedy that would follow. Everything changed when their father suddenly passed away. In his will, Richard Graves left the majority of the family estate, business assets, properties, and investments, to Jonathan. Michael received a considerable sum, but nothing compared to what his brother inherited. For Michael, this decision felt like the ultimate betrayal. It confirmed everything he had suspected about his place in the family hierarchy. He was second best, overlooked, and undervalued. Michael's reaction to the will was immediate and visceral. He felt robbed, not just of money, but of respect and recognition. The inheritance wasn't merely about wealth, it represented validation from their late father, someone whose approval Michael had long sought but never fully obtained. As he read through the legal documents detailing the division of assets, his anger boiled over into something dangerous. He became obsessed with reclaiming what he believed was rightfully his, not out of greed alone, but out of a desperate need to prove himself worthy. At first, Michael tried to rationalize his feelings. He told himself that Jonathan didn't deserve such a disproportionate share of the fortune. After all, hadn't Jonathan already enjoyed every advantage? Hadn't Michael suffered enough under the weight of his brother's success? These thoughts consumed him, fueling a desire for revenge that soon overshadowed any lingering affection or guilt. He began to see Jonathan not as his brother, but as an obstacle standing between him and the life he deserved. While Eleanor tried to mediate, urging Michael to be grateful for what he had, her words fell on deaf ears. Her pleas for unity and understanding came across as naive and irrelevant to Michael, who was now blinded by his fixation on justice, or rather, retribution. He convinced himself that taking drastic measures was justified, even necessary. What started as resentment transformed into a carefully plotted scheme, one that would ultimately lead to unimaginable consequences. Michael began crafting a plan, one that would not only ruin Jonathan but erase him altogether. He reached out to Jonathan under the guise of reconciliation, suggesting that they work together to expand the family business. Jonathan, always the protective older brother, agreed without hesitation. Trusting his sibling implicitly, he welcomed Michael back into the fold, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Over the following months, Michael meticulously positioned himself within Jonathan's world. He suggested lucrative but risky investments, secretly forging Jonathan's signature on legal documents that would tie him to fraudulent deals. Each move was calculated, designed to weaken Jonathan's position while strengthening Michael's control over the family assets. He manipulated employees, spreading rumors about Jonathan's mismanagement, gradually turning allies into enemies. The cracks in Jonathan's empire began to form, subtle at first but growing wider with each passing day. Meanwhile, Michael started draining Jonathan's accounts, redirecting money to offshore holdings. He hired private investigators to dig up any dirt that could be used against his brother, searching for weaknesses to exploit. Every action was deliberate, driven by a singular goal: dismantling Jonathan's life piece by piece. Even Eleanor, now aging and frail, sensed the tension but never imagined how far Michael was willing to go. To her, the conflict still seemed like a minor squabble that could be resolved with patience and love. She couldn't fathom the depths of malice brewing in her younger son's heart. Despite his best efforts to remain vigilant, Jonathan found himself increasingly overwhelmed. Unusual financial transactions, missing files, and sudden hostility from longtime colleagues raised red flags, but he struggled to pinpoint the source of the problem. Doubts crept in, gnawing at his confidence and straining his mental health. Was he losing his grip on the business? Or was there a saboteur lurking in the shadows? Little did he know, the person responsible was closer than he ever imagined. One night, Jonathan received an anonymous tip that changed everything. A whistleblower, an employee loyal to Jonathan, provided undeniable proof of Michael's deception. Furious and heartbroken, Jonathan confronted his brother at their family estate. The confrontation quickly escalated. Jonathan demanded answers, his voice shaking with anger and disbelief. But Michael, now cornered, showed no remorse. He lashed out, revealing the extent of his resentment, blaming Jonathan for everything wrong in his life. "You always got everything," Michael shouted, his voice trembling with rage. "Dad loved you more. Everyone loves you more. And now, even after he's gone, you're still stealing everything from me." Jonathan stared at him, shock etched onto his face. "This isn't about Dad," he replied, his tone low and steady. "It's about you. About your hatred and jealousy. You've destroyed our family because you couldn't handle being second best." Those words struck a nerve. Michael's face contorted with fury, his hands balling into fists. In that moment, reason abandoned him entirely. Grabbing a heavy marble paperweight from their father's old study, he struck Jonathan across the head. Jonathan collapsed, blood pooling around him. Michael stood frozen, panting, staring at what he had done. The golden child, the favorite, was now lying lifeless before him. As the realization of his actions hit him, Michael's hands trembled. He had fantasized about taking control, about finally being the one in power. But standing over his brother's lifeless body, he felt nothing but a deep, gnawing horror. The man who had been both his rival and his brother was gone, leaving behind a void that no amount of money or power could fill. Panic set in. Michael staged the scene to look like a break-in gone wrong, wiping away fingerprints, discarding evidence. But no matter how meticulously he tried to cover his tracks, the truth was inevitable. Jonathan's wife, Emily, had been suspicious of Michael's involvement in the financial discrepancies. When she couldn't reach Jonathan that night, she drove to the estate only to find the horrifying scene. The police were called immediately. Within hours, detectives swarmed the property, collecting evidence and interviewing witnesses. Security footage from the estate captured Michael entering and leaving the premises multiple times that evening, contradicting his alibi. Financial records, forged documents, and testimony from the whistleblower painted a damning picture. The investigation unraveled Michael's elaborate scheme. Forensic analysts traced the stolen funds to offshore accounts linked directly to Michael, exposing his attempts to launder the money. Employees who had been coerced into participating in the fraud came forward, confessing under oath. With each new revelation, the web of deceit tightened around Michael, leaving him with no escape. When the charges were filed, the public reacted with shock and outrage. How could a brother betray his sibling so cruelly? Media coverage dominated headlines, painting the story as a modern-day Cain and Abel tale. For Eleanor, the reality of her son's crimes was almost too much to bear. She withdrew into herself, unable to reconcile the loving boy she once knew with the monster who had committed such atrocities. Michael's trial was swift and unforgiving. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence, leaving little room for doubt. The jury deliberated for less than a day before returning a guilty verdict on all counts: fraud, conspiracy, and murder. Sentencing was equally severe: life in prison without parole. As the judge delivered the sentence, Michael remained expressionless, his eyes fixed on the floor. Any trace of the charismatic, ambitious young man who had once dreamed of greatness had vanished, replaced by a hollow shell haunted by his choices. Betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes, the deepest wounds are inflicted by those closest to us. Michael's story is a haunting reminder of how unchecked resentment can lead to irreversible consequences. His descent into darkness began with jealousy and envy, emotions that festered unchecked until they consumed him entirely. Along the way, he sacrificed not only his relationship with his brother but also his own humanity. For the viewers at home, this case serves as a chilling cautionary tale, one that forces us to question: how well do we truly know those we trust the most? Do we recognize the warning signs of resentment before it spirals out of control? And perhaps most importantly, can we learn to forgive and heal before it's too late? What do you think led Michael to cross the ultimate line? Was it years of neglect, or was this darkness always within him? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories that unveil the twisted truths lurking in the shadows of everyday life. And remember, sometimes, the greatest danger isn't from the outside. It's from within.